Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Filter Free America. In this episode, I talk with Megan, and Megan shares with me the story of her young sister's suicide. For those concerned, there are no graphic details of death, but there definitely is tremendous emotional carnage. We start with background on her family, discuss events leading up to her sister's first suicide attempt in the following 4 years after. And then we address her actual suicide that was just under 4 months before this recording. After that, we talk about the impact of her sister's death on her and her family, the process of essentially picking up the pieces of life after the death of her sister. And she does share some incredibly important words about understanding suicide near the end of the episode. Guys, I'm incredibly humbled to be entrusted by Megan to share her sister's story and her story with you. The topic that is the tragedy of suicide reaches every societal demographic on the planet. No amount of success, fame, or wealth can insulate us as humans from the gripping power of depression that unfortunately so often leads to this form of death. I do ask, though, that as you listen, please try not to spend too much energy attempting to armchair analyze the causes of this specific suicide. That's definitely not the motivation for this podcast episode. This podcast is the telling of, one individual's unique and personal experience of losing a loved one to suicide. I guess I could ask, please appreciate this episode as a relatively rare look at a very personal and tragic part of the human experience. It's a look at something we never want to have to experience firsthand, but nonetheless, I think we all have, at least to one degree or another, some curiosity about it. I do hope that if any of us are ever forced into this experience, I hope we leave this conversation in this episode with some preparation and understanding for it. I'm definitely not trying to say that this episode will give an ironclad instructions on how to deal with a suicide, if it's in your life, or instructions on how to help another survivor close to you deal with one. I mean, the geography of the human existence, of course, is far too complicated to create one single map to navigate something like suicide. So please consider that as well while listening. As always, the Filter Free America podcast is sponsored by simplewebsite.us. Essentially, simplewebsite.us is a company that helps people better build their own websites using the Squarespace website builder. So please go to simplewebsite.us to check them out and help support the podcast. Also, if you appreciate this episode, please share links to it on social media. That, of course, is the best form of advertisement for this podcast. And it's also a great tool to spread a message like what you're about to hear in this episode. To make that easier, there is always going to be a post made about each and every episode that I release. You can find it easily on the Filter Free America Facebook page. If you follow me or friends with me personally on Facebook, you can I always share it there as well too. Also, if you want to find like a quick link to the Filter Free America social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever, just go to filterfreeamerica.com, filterfreeamerica, America intentionally misspelled with the letter K.com. And you'll find all kinds of quick links there to our social media, as well as links to all the different options as far as listening to the podcast go. With all that out of the way, I guess we'll go ahead and kick this episode off. So here we go. Surviving my sister's suicide with Megan, right here on Filter Free America. Let's go. All right. So, Megan, will you start by telling me kind of what early family life was like for you and your sister?
Sure. My sister and I were 7 years apart. We grew up in suburbia. We're also first-generation Asian Americans, okay. If that helps, I don't know, inform your picture of what growing up was like. But
what, were you adopted or were you
No,
okay.
No. Biological.
Okay.
Biological kids. My 7 years is maybe not for everyone, but it's quite an age gap. So my sister followed me around everywhere, as siblings do. They bug you, and I mean, my parents were kind of the stereotypical Asian parents in that they had high standards. All A's was kind of expected, but and you know, just annoying things like maybe more strict about which friends you can. Well, no, that's not true. Maybe a little bit more strict. I just remember growing up thinking like, oh, my parents are more strict than other kids' parents from my vantage point anyway.
Okay.
But honestly, a really privileged, lucky childhood from what I remember.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any health issues or anything like that in regards to your sister? Anything of note? Anything to consider?
Yeah. My sister and I both had eczema.
Okay.
I grew out of it. She didn't. My parents were concerned and they took her to see all these different dermatologists. So I know that they were concerned. They wanted to fix an illness, and that also meant trying different treatments. Like I was in college by the time all this was happening, but from what I heard, things like going to a dermatologist, trying these steroid shots, or there was even a light therapy treatment. And my understanding is that they were effective for a short period of time, but ultimately it wasn't a long-term fix.
Okay.
So they kept switching up medications and stuff, and I think that probably did affect her hormones and her development.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was it anything did she have any kind of, aside from health effects of that, was there any kind of bullying angle or anything like that? Was there any like physical appearance stuff that was?
Right. Bullying, I'm not aware of them. My sister, I can tell you this. My sister, I'm a talker.
Right.
My sister always clammed up. She had this kind of silent rage about her whenever she was upset. And I remember thinking, like, what's wrong? Let's talk this out. But she just would not want to talk with me about whatever she was going through. So I don't think there was bullying, but who knows, there may have been.
Okay.
And a couple months before she died, she finally opened up to me, and I did learn some things. Like, I think my parents taking her to see all these different dermatologists, she had thought that they didn't love her because she wasn't pretty enough. And I remember thinking, like, of course they love you. Like, that's what she believed growing up. And that's hard. It's hard to just...
You said she didn't really, up until right before, she wasn't really open about that particular thing. But were you the person that she confided to about anything, or did she have a confidant of sorts?
I think she did have a few close friends that she would confide in sometimes. But overall, I remember her saying she never wanted to burden other people with her own problems. She knew other people had their own struggles, and she just didn't want to burden them. So I think she had her moments where she could talk to people, but not on an ongoing kind of way. Maybe every now and then she would confide in someone, but
Gotcha. What about, again, we're talking prior to the first attempt. Was there any kind of emotional triggering thing or anything dramatic in her life or something that she had that was a possible reaction to, or that she said was a reaction to after the fact?
You mean her suicide attempts?
Yeah.
Attempt one. So her first attempt, what I remember is my parents told me I was up here in Minnesota.
And I'm sorry, help me with, what was her age? 'Cause you said you're 7 years apart, but I didn't get an age.
Oh, right. Her first attempt was when she was 17.
Okay.
Her fatal attempt this past May was when she was 21.
Okay.
So, right. So when at her first attempt, when she was 17, I was in Minnesota. I flew down immediately. We set her up with therapy. She didn't really want to talk about it, though. So I don't know if there was any particular trigger for that moment in time. And sorry, this is very stream of consciousness. I'm remembering things she told me. She told me, I remember she told me this a couple months ago, that the first time she thought that she wanted to die was actually it was when she was visiting. She and my parents were visiting me up here in Minnesota, and she and I had some sort of fight. I don't even remember what it was. It was probably over something stupid, but she said that it was a very sudden, forceful thought. It wasn't like a gradual thing, which I thought was, I don't know, weird. I didn't know what to make of that. Yeah, but I don't remember any particular event that triggered her attempt when she was 17, or for that matter, any particular event that triggered her to kill herself when she was 21 this past May.
Okay. As you know, again, you were at college and weren't there all the time, but did she hobbies did she have? Things that she did? Was she, friends that she interacted with? Was there any kind of, I guess what I'm saying is, like, as a person who's trying to put themselves in that situation, trying to think if that was somebody that's close to me, like, would there have been of anything of a sign leading up to that besides, a fight that you guys had or anything like that you would be considered as a red light or
Right.
something to consider?
Yeah. So as part of processing my grief, I go to a lot of survivor of suicide loss grief groups. And for a lot of parents, it's completely out of left field. They had no idea.
Really?
Their kid seemed, was extroverted, sociable, was captain of the football team. And then, they killed themselves. And people are very good at hiding their true feelings. I guess I still struggle with this question. Like, I kind of wish I saw those signs before her first attempt. And even after her first attempt, I was a bit in denial. She was young. I thought, everyone struggles when they're a young adult, and I thought she would grow out of it.
Right.
There are some more obvious signs, right? Like people making plans, giving their stuff away, making comments like, "Oh, you won't have to worry about me anymore."
Yeah,
or,
those are the things I've heard.
Those are more obvious, and I think when people hear about suicide, they immediately want some sort of explanation,
right.
some one-liner sentence like, "Oh, it was a breakup or a scandal or financial troubles or what have you." But I think people are complex, and I think there are a lot of reasons that drove my sister to that point. There's actually one of the things that the director of the Minnesota Center of Suicidology, one of my burning questions for him was, what if I had just moved home and strapped my sister down and forced her to go to the psych ward, and just maybe, what if I could have saved her? Like, that is one of, as a survivor, you run through all the what ifs, right? And he gave me this analogy. If you imagine all the traumatic experiences a person has, all the, mental illnesses, all the triggers as individual drops or teaspoons of water in a water glass. When that water glass fills to the brim and spills over, that's when that person has reached their threshold for pain and life. And he said, maybe that day you could have taken out a teaspoon, but there's all the weight of the rest of that water that you had no control or ability to remove. So I know bits and pieces of my sister's life that I think brought her to that point. She hid a lot of herself from me. But I know one of the weird stages of grief that may not always be unique to suicide survivors is you go through this crazed detective trying to piece together that story phase.
Right.
She wiped her phone, and I ended up getting billing data from AT&T because I needed to tell her friends, but being 7 years apart, we didn't exactly have mutual friends. I didn't have their contact information, so I ended up using Excel to analyze that data. Like, which phone numbers did she contact the most? Was there a phone number right before she killed herself that she contacted? Just things like that. And I found out that my sister had contacted the National Line for Sexual Abuse.
Oh my goodness.
Last year. So, I mean, I had no idea. There was so much about my sister that she didn't share with me, and I had no idea. But you know, whatever that experience was, that abusive experience, I'm sure contributed to her water glass, contributed to the pain she must have felt as a person.
Right.
That was a long-winded answer.
Right. No, that's fine. Take as much time as you need.
Yeah.
Going back to the first attempt then, and now knowing that, and I'm sure there was a moment where you and her had sat down after the first attempt and had a conversation about that. Can you tell me, as much as you're comfortable, tell me about that conversation, how that went, what was said back and forth, how little or how much she said? Did anything?
Yeah. I'm having a hard time remembering, but what I do remember is...
And again, for people listening, this is 4 years prior to...
Yeah. What I remember is we set her up with therapy. I remember being in a room with her, myself, and my dad, and the therapist, and just crying and talking about how scared I was. And my sister was just silent. And she must have felt guilty, and I don't know.
Silent angry, or silent sad, or silent just kind of pulling herself out of the situation kind of thing?
Trying to remember. I think it was just this silent, like, clearly she's going through stuff in her own world and her own mind. I think kind of ashamed and like not wanting to be there. It's hard to remember.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you comfortable telling me how she tried the first time? Is that something you're comfortable?
I am comfortable telling you, but I as part of the research I did, you have to be careful about discussing method.
Okay.
Talking about suicide itself is not, contrary to what a lot of people believe, it doesn't put the idea in people's heads.
Right. Discussing the topic of it.
Yeah, and actually talking about it helps open up the conversation for people who do have suicidal thoughts. But talking about the method, that's where it gets a little iffy. I don't know why you would pay attention to this in particular, but if you look at media coverage of suicide deaths from celebrities, for example, they rarely discuss the method for that reason, because you don't want to glorify it or discussing method can be potentially harmful.
Okay.
Like, it would probably be okay, but I'm going to err on the side of caution.
I understand.
Yeah. So,
what were your, after the attempt, and you're comfortable when we saying attempt on the first one, okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
What was your parents' kind of after the fact, but semi-immediate reaction to the whole thing? You said they went to counseling with her. Did they feel any kind of responsibility? Did they feel any kind of anger towards her? Did they... Tell me what that's like, dealing with that after an unsuccessful... Well, I'm sorry, not successful, but...
An attempt.
An attempt that didn't...
A non-fatal attempt.
Non-fatal attempt, thank you.
Yeah. Again, that's kind of a blur. And honestly, I think... after setting her up with therapy, there was a little bit of denial going on. Like, there was an attempt, but it was more of a cry for help. It was more, there wasn't... They took it seriously, but there was still kind of this, like, we'll figure this out. This is... And I think they did feel anger. And I felt anger too. Like, how could you do this? I mean, you can't help but feel that way. I'm trying to remember.
Just whatever you remember.
I think most of it was like, it was probably a cry for help, just trying to
This is their rationale?
rationalize it away, right?
Okay.
And of course they were scared, and I don't know.
Had your family ever had to deal with a suicide in the family prior to her attempt and her final suicide? Was there anybody else that ever dealt with it?
Not in our family, no.
Okay.
Not that I'm aware of.
All right, so it's a new situation for them as well.
Yeah.
Okay. What was your initial? I'm sure, honestly, when you first hear that, there's immediate concern, but you probably, and correct me if I'm wrong, probably haven't been doing a lot of studying or looking into suicide prior to hers.
Right.
Did you have, right, wrong, or indifferent? Did you have any? Were you mad at her? Were you any kind of reaction that maybe looking back was it right? But just to help people understand that these are sometimes emotions that are generated from either an attempt or a suicide.
Yeah. After her first attempt,
Yeah.
I think I was just scared,
Okay.
and I buried it down, and I regret that. I wish I learned all the things that I know now.
Right.
Now that it's too late.
And when you say, are you talking about fear of it happening again, or just fear of the idea of it?
Fear of the idea of it, fear of it happening again, but again, rationalizing in a way like that was a dark time. She will figure it out. It'll be okay. She pushes me away, but she just has to figure it out. And I don't know. I think I had a lot of empathy for her, but of course I was like, how could you do this? How could you do this to us? And yeah.
I think that's a fair, honest reaction. I mean, you don't ever want to, I would assume, I've had some people close to me, but not super close to me. Mm-hmm. I've been kind of on the outside looking in type deal. But I can understand that reaction, though. I can understand that, you're like, oh, why'd you do that to us type deal.
Right, yeah. I don't know. I guess, yeah, your gut reaction is,
right,
how could you do this to me, when it's really about them?
Right.
And I guess that's another gut reaction. Like, you don't,
and I have to think
like, what probably I should have done is immediately figured out or tried to learn, like, what is the best thing I can do for her. And I think in my mind, again, part of the rationalizing and part of the, like, I was like, okay, I don't know what to do, but the mental health counselor or therapist will take care of it. They know what to do. They will take care of this. And that was not the best reaction, honestly. There's a limit to what mental health professionals can do, especially nowadays. I hear people talking about how they can't see someone for months. But I think your family members have a lot of impact on you.
Right.
So I don't know. I wish I supported her in the way she needed it. She did not want to talk about it, and I still don't know how exactly I could have drawn her out. But before she died, she did tell me that she was afraid I would judge her.
Okay.
And she was 7 years younger than me, so I always treated her like a kid. She hated that. And, as she grew older, I tried to be a bit better about it, try to stop babying her, but I don't know. I wish I reassured her more and, like, explicitly said things like, I'm proud of you, and it's okay that you have these dark thoughts, and that it's okay, I still love you. I did say I love you, and she rolled her eyes and said, oh, you're being so annoying. Like, that's what I'm talking about with her pushing me away. Like, I But I shouldn't have let that like hurt my feelings. I should have realized that she was not in a good place, so she wasn't exactly going to react in a healthy kind of way. Someone in a lot of pain will probably...
I was going to ask, looking back, was that reaction, do you feel that was more defensive?
Yeah.
Than her real, like she...
I think...
And protecting herself from having to talk about what she was dealing?
Yeah, probably that. And she probably... I think she resented that I was suddenly treating her differently, too. She just wanted me to treat her like a normal person.
Right.
Instead of being like, oh, are you okay? And it's hard not to do that after someone makes a suicide attempt. Of course, Your gut reaction is like, I'm going to take care of you. Everything's going to be okay. I want you to know how much I love you. And that for her, that's not what she wanted. I don't know. I still think about what I should have done and what realistically would have been effective, or what realistically she would have been receptive to, but it's hard to know.
Well, let's move in kind of where in that 4-year window after the attempt. Was there any change at this point? I asked you before, was there anything leading up to that first attempt indicate or anything like that? Did she have a personality change, activity change, anything within that 4-year window? Did she have some highs, which as in where she was really happy and being productive in whatever her interests were, things like that? Or
yeah, so when she was 17, she wasn't doing well in school, which she ended up transferring high schools because she wanted a fresh start.
Okay.
I think there was a lot of shame there, and not knowing how to deal with the pressure to perform.
Okay.
She still struggled with school, and she did graduate. And my sister was the creative one in the family. She did theater, she sang, she played guitar, she danced. She had a lot of fun doing that. I actually really admired that about her, because I don't know, to get up in front of an audience and sing a solo, that sounds terrifying to me, and I really admired that about her. But yeah, she had hobbies, and I didn't know this, but I talked to her close friends from middle school and high school, and they said that she had this like very outgoing energy. She was big in her body movements. She always like gave you a hug. She always made you feel like she was really happy to see you. She was also completely anti-bullshit. She would definitely call you out.
Nice.
Yeah, which, I mean, I personally thought that was rude, but she was funny, and she was straightforward, and she told it like it was. But anyways, right, so she went to college, and I think she did continue to struggle with physical symptoms. She felt weak oftentimes.
I'm not aware of that. We're talking about the eczema again, right? What is the physical effects of that?
I mean, the eczema actually did eventually clear up after they stopped taking her to the doctor, and eczema is just a skin rash type of deal. And I think that probably affected her self-esteem too.
Right.
But I think, and this is theory, I don't actually know, but those hormone shots or those steroid shots, I think, did affect her hormones, and she would have a lot of side effects to medication, so she would just avoid that in general. She would feel weak and just have awful cramps. She told me that there was one month that she cried that entire month because she was in so much pain. And I don't know what physical illness she had that caused that. I still don't really know exactly what was going on, but
let me ask this. Something just kind of struck me was you were talking about, the hormone treatment. Was she on also any kind of medication post the first attempt? Any kind of psychotropic type thing or anything like that?
no, because of the side effects from her earlier experience, she avoided all sorts of medication, which obviously my parents and I were like, you should see a doctor, you should treat your mental illness, and she just completely refused. She saw a homeopathic doctor, and it was just there was no telling her what to do. And I don't know, part of me hates myself for describing her this way, because I feel like I'm painting a picture of this person who, and maybe your audience or whoever's listening might be thinking like, oh, yep, check, like that's the reason why she died, and that's why, I don't know. And that's not necessarily true, but, and it's like there's this giant puzzle, and I'm only explaining pieces of it. And I feel like I'm just not doing her justice. Because I really only saw like pieces of her life. But anyways, yeah, she did not take any psychotropic or psychiatric medication. But that is something I read, that sudden medication changes can really mess you up.
Well, I was considering, what you're saying also about the heart, because I don't know anything about it, so I'm
Right.
definitely not a doctor in any way.
Yeah.
But it's like, was there ever any consideration in that as the hormones that she was getting, does that cause any kind of imbalance on a psychological level?
Right. This is all hypothetical. I don't
Right.
know.
Okay.
I just know that she did have real physical, painful side effects later on in her life, and I'm just guessing that was the cause of some of her physical pain that she dealt with.
Right.
But yeah, that's a guess. I guess nobody has explicitly said, oh, you're experiencing these physical symptoms because of those earlier steroid shots that you took.
Right.
But with any medication, I think it is important to kind of wean off of them. And I think with all the different treatment types, there were times when they stopped her cold turkey, and I think that kind of exacerbated her symptoms. I remember her telling me that.
Okay.
But yeah, I feel like I went on another tangent.
That's fine. No, it's fine. This is
your
time
4
to do
years.
it.
Okay, what have I covered? She legitimately had to deal with physical pain much of her life. I know that she felt like nobody got her. Like, I know she also struggled with trichotillomania, which I didn't know was a thing until my sister suffered from it. But it's
what is it? Just from I don't know.
Right, it's hair pulling.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's I think like anxiety induced hair pulling.
Okay.
Like literally ripping your hair out. And the way one of the things that she said to me before she died is, if you have cancer or if you have an alcoholic parent, people just get it. But if you deal with trichotillomania and all these other things that I'm dealing with, it's not socially acceptable to just do nothing at home. But I feel safe at home. I feel safe in my room. So, and I remember at the time I just listened. I didn't. And I just remember thinking, you take all the time you need to heal. I won't judge you for needing to take that time. And my parents tried to reassure her of that too. They said everybody like struggles in their 20s. Like, you take all the time you need. So my parents were, I think kids can sense when their parents are disappointed in them or frustrated, but they did their very best to be kind and patient with her and to reassure her. But I don't doubt that there was some underlying shame, with just kind of being, she did go to college, but ended up dropping out her first semester because of some of her physical illness symptoms. So the plan was for her to kind of go home, heal herself, and then kind of go back to college, but that didn't end up happening. She tried some part-time jobs, but ended up quitting those, and she just, I think she felt like she couldn't succeed in life.
Would it be right to interpret as that she just never really could get into a rhythm of just living life? Is that right?
I think so. Right. And she was only 21, so it's just kind of, I mean, not to belittle her mental illness, but of course there's this part of me that's like, you just needed time to figure your shit out. Like, you just, and I guess there's a little bit of arrogance, kind of like, oh, I have life figured out. If this is what life is going to be for the rest of my life, then. But I don't know. I honestly, I've intellectually read about what it might be like to struggle with, what I interpret as stage 4 depression and having suicidal thoughts, but I don't actually know.
Right.
And I need to remind myself that I need to stop applying, like you can't rationalize with an irrational mind. Like, her mind was sick. Like, I don't know how people feel about souls or personality theory or whatever, but I do think your brain is an organ and it can fail just like any of your other organs.
Yeah.
So
I think that is, and I think that's something I'm discovering, and late in life is like when people say mental health, there really is a health component there. We tend to separate the two, like, oh, I've got a flu, but no, I've got depression.
Right.
But there is a health component there that I'll be honest, I don't think I took. I took for granted also the idea of it.
Yeah.
Can you take me now, maybe weeks or prior or days prior to her death?
Mm-hmm.
And kind of the same question that I had before, and it may be the same answer. Was there any kind of change in behavior or anything that if you were looking back, like, oh, that was an indicator that there was a ramp up of maybe I'm not handling it or saying it the right way,
no,
but
I know what you mean.
But kind of a build up to her getting to this point of, okay, I'm going to make another, try at this.
Yeah. So I went home for Christmas and New Year's, and actually, like I said, that was the first time she really opened up to me about a lot of stuff, particularly issues with guys and how she felt growing up and how she felt like she wasn't pretty enough and just all that. Like, that was news to me just this past December. And I actually felt relieved for the first time. I thought, you were able to open up to me. That's great. And it's hard to have a relationship with your younger sibling who pushes you away or just is rude and doesn't respond to your texts from a different state. So I had been struggling with kind of this back and forth between, like, just accept my love, damn it. Right. And like, well, fine, if you're going to ignore me, then I won't try that hard. It was this back and forth, because I loved her. And, so I thought this was a breakthrough. I thought, great, you can talk to me and we can stay in touch. I won't push her too much like I did in the past because she told me that was bad. I will be better. I will figure it out, and she will take the time she needs to heal. And actually, one of the ways that she hated talking about herself, so it was hard to call her and there's a lot of pressure in a phone conversation. It's one thing if you're kind of passively hanging out with someone, you're still spending time with them, right? So I thought maybe we can play video games together. So this past March, I asked her, you want to watch me play these video games through Twitch?
Right.
And she said, yeah. And we spent hours like on the phone just talking. She was so talkative that it would be like midnight or something. And I'd be like, I got to go to sleep and go to work tomorrow, you know? And I was so happy because it was like, this is great. This is what I wanted. Even though we don't live in the same state or the same city, I'm still able to connect with you and spend time with you the way I've always wanted. Like when we were kids growing up, she wouldn't leave me alone, and we've had all this struggle, but I'm figuring it out, and things will be okay. And then she killed herself. My sister sometimes would just leave the house, not respond to texts. And
just from you or from family, like totally disconnect, kind of?
Totally disconnect, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, and that's pretty, I mean, when you're a young adult, that can be kind of normal. We're all assholes sometimes and just don't respond to texts because you don't feel like dealing with people. So when my mom said that she went missing, I was really hoping that was the case. That she was just being an asshole and not responding. Because she had done that before in the past.
So, just so I can be as tactful as possible, she left home to do...
To kill herself,
kill herself.
Yeah. So, my parents were really worried. Maybe I won't go into detail about that, but
yeah, just whatever you're comfortable with.
My dad found her the next day, and nobody should have to find their kid like that. I have a lot of empathy for my sister, but I don't think I will ever forgive her for that. I have so much empathy for the pain she was in, but just the knowledge that my dad found her like that is... it's just the worst.
You were still out of state, right? At this time?
Yeah. He called me in the morning, said the words that she's dead, and my heart dropped. It feels like, I don't know, it's a constant feeling of your heart dropping. That cold dread that just sort of seeps into your chest, that's just there and it stays. Because the worst has happened, and I think in the back of your mind you always knew this might happen, but you don't think it actually will. Especially because for me, like I said, I thought she was getting better. Because she was talkative, because she opened up to me for the first time. And actually talking to other survivors, that's not an uncommon theme. A lot of times people say things like they just made plans with me. I had plans to have lunch with them the next day. Like, it's...
You're talking about to the people outside looking in, that it feels like there's a point of recovery or improvement? Is that...
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for some people. Again, people are very good at hiding...
Right.
what they're actually going through. Yeah. The few days before, she responded to texts normally. So I really did not see it coming at all.
Did you return back to, or
yeah,
you were here, right? You were
here. I was here in Minnesota, and I flew home that day and was with my parents. And I think in a family, sometimes there are all sorts of reactions, right? I kind of clicked into that role of just doing tasks. Like, I will talk with the funeral director. I will sort out. I will write the thank you cards to the neighbors who were kind enough to bring food over, and I will close out her bank accounts, and you just sort of focus like I just got to do these things, and just trying to help my parents as best as I can.
Was there again, one of those questions of, tell me what you're comfortable telling me. When you've flown back to them and you guys are together in a room together, can you tell me any kind of the initial conversation? Was there any, and this maybe not awkward to you, but was there any anger? Was there any release or after this now? I just got to imagine that the emotions are churning. Yeah. And then, like, you have some anger, you have some sadness and all that. But when you guys are together, the family unit again, what's that interaction like?
I think you're in shock. They were exhausted dealing with the police. Sorry, having a hard time remembering.
Whatever you have and whatever you're comfortable with.
Yeah, there's just this thick air of despair. There wasn't a lot of talking, just being shattered together.
Right.
I had actually flown home thinking that the police had found her, and my mom told me my dad found her, so I don't know, I feel like, I know some people react with these these blood-curdling screams and wailing, and I guess that's just not how my family reacted. We were all in shock and I had never seen my dad cry before. It was awful. We just sort of sobbed together. So, yeah, that's what I remember. I think I did block out some of those first couple of days.
Kind of a just more of a curiosity kind of question. And how does the law enforcement, when they're involved at that point, did you feel that how did they deal with you guys? Was it politeness? Do you get what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
were they kind? Did it seem more business-like? I'm just curious,
So I had actually missed most of that. My dad had found her, called 911. My mom said it was like a scene out of a movie or TV show, that just like a whole group of cops just rushing through the house. And I think what I remember my mom telling me is some of them were kind of just, I think policemen and women they see awful things, and I think there is a level of being desensitized.
Right.
I think there was one detective or policeman or woman that just put just put a hand on my mom's shoulder, and that's when she knew that it was real. I actually, about a month after my sister died, another person in
my partner's family suddenly died. So I actually experienced the police that way.
Okay.
And there's kind of this tentative professionalism. You know, they have to get this information out. I think it depends on the person. That's my experience with policemen.
I'm sure it varies.
Yeah.
I didn't know how much of a if they acted more as a burden because of the business side of things, or did they show empathy and kind of help you guys all? I'm sure because there's a legal component. I'm assuming.
I think
it has to go through the processes, paperwork, or whatever.
Right. Yeah, I think
it's one of many probably issues or hurdles that a family has to deal with in this kind of situation.
Yeah, I think there are a few individuals who showed empathy, but my understanding is most of them were like, "This is a job; we need to take care of it."
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Let me ask this. This happened in May of this year. We're not too far away. Is there any sense of normalcy now in the have you guys talking about your family unit, and I'm sure your partner, you guys are dealing with this as a couple as well too. Mm-hmm. Are you 50% back to where you were? Are you 80% back to where? Do you feel like things are coming back together? I mean, it's always going to be something you carry with you and deal with. But where are you in that, getting it back together and getting back into a normalcy of life, I guess?
So when it first happened, I had actually told one of my coworker friends, like, look, I don't want any cards. I don't want any flowers. I don't want anything. I want everybody to treat me as normal as possible, because I thought that's what I would need when I came back, to just a sense of normalcy. And then, after spending a few weeks with my parents and coming back, I realized there is no normal going back. There is no normal after something like this. And it's weird because I didn't interact with my sister most of my time up here. We had separate lives. So it's easy for me to play pretend. Like, I don't know, like she is studying abroad or something, and just, but honestly, what has helped me a lot is my reaction is, well, first I thought I need a sense of normalcy. Then I realized, no, there's no normal after this. And then third was just kind of digging deep into what happened, learning about suicide as much as I could, and talking about it with my therapist, talking about it with my close friends, with other people who have experienced this loss. Like, talking about it has helped a lot. I don't know. It's hard to answer your question because I feel like I'm changed forever.
Right.
But I guess, yeah, it hasn't even been 4 months. And I am, it's like I have this deep, deep well of sadness that I can engage with at any moment. It's kind of, this is a stupid analogy, but you know how Hulk says his thing is, his secret is that he's always angry.
Right.
For me, I feel like I'm always sad. And I've gotten pretty good at blocking that and just pretending like I'm okay. I'm still able to laugh, though. I don't know. It's hard to put a percentage to it.
Tell me this, speaking again about your partner who's in the studio here with us right now. Is it hard to be loving or emotional, enjoy his company, enjoy his time? Is there difficulties involved in that for a survivor as well too? Is there was there a time of like, I need some time to do this before we can go to dates again, or whatever? Is there that angle of it too for a survivor?
Yeah, I mean, each survivor is different. Like I said, I'm a talker, so I talk about my sister every day with my partner. Yeah, I mean, obviously like I said, you have this deep well of sadness in you, so it's hard to be a couple. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I've not been pulling my weight with household chores and stuff, and he's been more than kind about picking up the slack and being patient with me. Something I'm trying my best to remember is there's this quote, and I might get it wrong, but it's something like, to honor those who have died. It's like, what do we regret most for the people who have died? We regret the future they will never have, and that they don't get to experience this life to the fullest the way you wanted them to. So the best way to honor them is to live fully, and I am trying to do that. I kind of have to make an effort to go on dates and stuff, and it's hard, but sometimes I'm able to kind of, I don't know, put the lid on that well of sadness and just live my life, go to work, kind of do my best to switch that part of my brain off, and I think it's getting a bit easier to do that as time goes by.
That's good.
Yeah.
A couple more questions before I kind of want to turn it up and turn it over to you and kind of close it out. But you said that you, after it happened, talking about coworkers and friends and all that, what you told them you wanted. But for someone who ever maybe has to deal with it in the future, could you tell me what were good things that friends and family did for you that you really, really appreciated? And maybe what's something that's either just clumsiness of us just being humans and not knowing how to deal with things that, and again, maybe it's case by case, but for you, maybe was there any too much intrusiveness too soon, not enough, what worked, what didn't work as far as somebody having to deal with or having to comfort a survivor, I guess.
Right. It's hard to say because every survivor is different, but
Right.
for me, I wanted to talk about it. It was unfortunate that I told my coworker, like, I don't want to talk about it, because I realized the opposite was true. But I didn't know how to bring it up to coworkers, like just during lunch, like, hey guys, remember when my sister died? Well, she killed herself. It's hard.
Right.
I think probably when I first came back, my friends thought, well, she needs a distraction. And what I really wanted was for people to see and acknowledge my grief, understand that a horrible thing happened, and not try to, be like, let's go to a baseball game. It's fine. Everything's fine. Like, 'cause it's not fine. Or people are like, oh, I didn't want to remind you by bringing it up. And I'm like, you're not going to remind me. Like, it's not like I forgot my sister died. It's not, I think about my sister all the time. So you're not going to remind me. Yeah, just, I think it is difficult to broach that topic, but I think it's important to just say, if you want to talk about it, I will listen. If you don't want to talk about it, I will just be there. I'll just sit with you. And if that person is like, no, I really don't want that, then, I mean, maybe respect their wishes, but I think it helps to just say, I will sit with you in this grief. I know how much pain you're in, and I can't even imagine, but I will be there with you. I will meet you there. I will meet you halfway. Because I think that was one of my unrealistic hopes or expectations, was that, you know, it's like, hey, I stabbed myself and I'm bleeding and I'm in pain. Could you also stab yourself and be in pain with me? Like, I wanted people to feel even a fraction of this sadness, but I think people protect themselves. They try to explain it away, try to find the silver lining, or say everything happens for a reason, and it's like they're comforting themselves rather than comforting me, right? So
do you think part of that is also, and this is to me, because it's a scary topic to me.
Yeah.
So do you think that a lot of that is also their fear of something? It's so, at least to me, or I'm sure the people who study it have a better understanding, but it's I fear because I don't understand it, right? Like
yeah, I don't doubt it. I mean, it's a hard topic to bring up and talk about, for sure, and I can understand that. I mean, before any of this happened, I would have done the same things. I would have avoided it. I would have thought, the last thing this person wants is for me to bring it up to them.
All right.
But for me, that was the case. I needed to talk about it. I wanted, like, I think people would just sort of clam up, be afraid of saying the wrong thing, and, like, hardening their heart, like, nope, I can't cry right now. I'm going to my face is going to be blank. I'm not going to engage, not going to make eye contact. But that was a bit hurtful, and again, it was unrealistic, but I wanted people to be just as heartbroken as I was, you know. Again, I wanted people to acknowledge, like, how real and how heartbreaking this is. So, yeah, it's a hard thing to talk about, but, and I don't know, I know for my dad, he does not want to talk about it. He's kind of Spock-like in that, like, very matter-of-fact, very logical. Like, I remember I tried to convince him to go to a survivor's grief group, and my dad said something to the effect of, like, why? What's the point? And I said, and of course, like, I was like, I don't know, you might get some comfort, you might get some advice. And he just sort of, in that brutal matter-of-fact way, he just said, it's not going to bring her back. And I was like, I know it's not going to bring her back, but what are you doing to take care of yourself? You know, I don't know. He's not a talker, so it's a little unfair of me to try to force somebody to grieve the same way I am, but I've personally found it very helpful to just be open and honest and to talk about it and kind of directly address these feelings that I'm having.
Mom, is she the same? Is she?
She does talk about it a little bit more. She does have a lot of anger. It's like, it's a roller coaster of anger and just deep sorrow. She switches back and forth between like remembering when she was a little kid and how she'd smile and laugh and have her friends over, and then just being angry. But my mom also does not want to talk about it with others, which again is their decision. I just I gave them resources, I gave them names of therapists and stuff too, just so they have it, even though they probably won't use it, but yeah, they're just they're just doing their best to survive.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's almost, I've got to imagine that as a parent, the the processing is maybe it's not fair to say more challenging, but it's got to be uniquely challenging.
Yeah. I
for
mean,
a parent.
They lived with her.
Right.
And my sister, I remember my mom saying that towards the end, she described my sister's heart like this hard shield. Any love or words of encouragement you threw at it was just like, it would just bounce off of that shield. Like there was just no getting in. And that must have been so hard. Like seeing your kid in pain, isolating herself, doing your best to encourage them, and not being able to help them. Again, like I said, I live in a different world. I didn't interact with my sister on a daily basis. I didn't see her, but my parents did, and it must be harder. I mean, I love my sister, but there's no doubt in my mind that this is harder for my parents. So, yeah.
The last question I want to ask you, maybe in part to the message that you want to share at the end, but whenever you see someone on TV about suicide or another podcast about suicide, it seems like it's always a default. Call this number if you need help, and why that's helpful, I guess. It feels like it kind of compartmentalizes, just scrunches everything in one little number, and that's it. And you've done a lot of study and looking into resources as a survivor, and you have a unique perspective now. Can you tell listeners, as a survivor, what's available to them, or what you recommend for dealing with something like this, and potentially anyone with having thoughts or feeling this kind of sadness that may lead them to consider something like this? Can you tell them what you know about dealing with that? Just anything more than just a phone number is what I'm trying to get at, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I looked at my sister's phone records. I don't think she called that number. I didn't see that number at all. And I think one way to look at that phone number, which is 1-800-273-8255, is to see it as a resource. You can be with somebody who is struggling and having suicidal thoughts, and call that number, and they will help you kind of walk through what to do. I think, well, the first part of your question, resources for survivors, I do recommend going to those grief groups. I mean, it's so isolating. You're just sort of living your life, having to go to work, dealing with this tragedy, and just trying to be normal, but you feel like nobody understands you, nobody wants to talk about it, even though it's on your mind all the time. So just sitting and being with people who've been through what you have been through is really healing. I know I also am constantly on the suicide bereavement subreddit.
Okay.
So sometimes reading other people's stories and experiences you can learn from them, like something I learned about because this is very tragic, especially if you saw some violence or saw traumatic things related to it. I know one type of therapy called EMDR is something that people recommend to help kind of
do you know what the acronym is for?
Eye movement. No, I can't remember.
Okay, EMDR. So
yeah, I think it has something to do with rapid eye movement, which I would think is weird, but whatever works to get you through your trauma, exactly. Honestly. Yeah, and as for people with having suicidal thoughts, I guess I just want to say, I don't judge you. I think You deserve a fighting chance. I mean, sorry, I'm struggling.
Take your time.
I want to say that there are more options to end your pain other than death. You deserve love and support. So I think it is worth calling that number and taking that step towards getting the help you need. And I think there's actually a lot of education that needs to happen with families and friends surrounding people who struggle with mental illness. Like I said, there's not enough mental health professionals, which means that you need to be better. You as the support, I think we freak out so much and freeze up and think, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. And you just sort of freeze up. But I think it is worth your time to learn how to respond to somebody in a mental health crisis. What are some of the encouraging things to say that is actually helpful? Because I think oftentimes mental health emergencies kind of, you don't expect them. And caught off guard, you say the wrong things. You freeze up. There is such a thing as mental health first aid. There's also specifically an online, it's 1 to 2 hours suicide prevention training that I think is worth taking. Because if you think about it, like if someone that you love or you care about suddenly turned to you and asked you the question, do you ever feel like going to sleep and never waking up? Ask yourself if you know exactly what to do in that situation.
I have no clue myself, personally.
Right. And that kind of thing happens out of nowhere and you freeze up and you don't know what to do. And that's why I think, people take CPR first aid training voluntarily. They make the time to take that training. And I think it's also worth your time to learn how to handle those situations. So I guess that's, I don't know, the advice that I would have.
All right.
Yeah.
And I just want to back. I don't want to make light of the number itself. It just feels like sometimes that's the only thing that's offered up. And what you just said, I mean, just the understanding and giving that example. I mean, that's eye opening right there, and something I'll look into personally now.
Yeah.
Is there when we're wrapping up here, is there anything else, anything I neglected to ask you think that's important, or anything you want to share, or anything at all related to the situation that you want to end the podcast with?
Yeah. I want to share an analogy or a thought experiment that the director of the Minnesota Center of Suicidology shared with me. I think one thing that people think is suicide is just selfish. And I'm not going to lie, I've thought that before too. But I kind of wanted to illustrate why it's not selfish. And I mean, again, I will admit, sometimes I feel enraged at my sister for putting my parents and I through this, but I don't think she's selfish. And this thought experiment really helped me with that. So imagine that you are immortal, but you can't defend yourself. Nothing can kill you, but you do feel pain. Now imagine that I'm going to take a hammer and slam it over the side of your head every 5 minutes. Maybe I'll give you a break for an hour or for a day, but I'm always going to come back and hit you with that hammer. If you believe that pain is never going to end, and it's sustained like that, you're just not going to think about,
your family or how much you're going to hurt them if you die. All you're thinking about is getting away from that pain. So oftentimes people struggling with these debilitating mental illnesses, that's how they feel. You know, that is how much pain they're in. And again, they don't believe it's ever going to end. So I challenge you to, when you think of mental health, believe the person that they're in a lot of pain. It's not just that they're lazy or that they just need to buck up. It's not. If it were that simple, they would have done it. I don't think anybody struggling with mental illness or depression or anxiety or anything, anybody struggling with life, it's not as simple as being lazy or not trying hard enough. I bet you they hate themselves for feeling inadequate and like a burden to others. So yeah, I challenge you to have empathy for people struggling that way and to treat them with respect, treat them like people. I don't know, that analogy or that thought experiment really changed my perspective and level of empathy I have for people who struggle with mental illness. So
it's helpful to me.
Yeah.
Get that. Thank you for taking time to do this, and thank you for being as open with me about this.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. There we go. Definitely a somber and tear-jerking episode of the Filter Free America podcast. I definitely hope you guys appreciated the strength required for Megan to share that story. I can't possibly fathom how hard it was for her to come in here, sit across from a total stranger who, I mean, I met her via Facebook and haven't known her other than the conversation about this. Haven't really had a chance to, to speak to her, get to know her or anything. But she still came in here, sat down, told her story to me in this form. And that in itself is a pretty powerful thing, and something I definitely respect. Definitely respect her strength. So yeah, I hope you all were able to take something out of that. I do all kinds of different episodes here. I do I talk about the obscure, the crude, the funny, the bizarre, but these kinds of stories are also important to me as well too. So I hope you appreciate the collection of them all. And I hope that it's, when we talk about something like this, I hope there is, some kind of benefit gained, that you can take away from it, because that is definitely what I'm trying to do as well. I don't want to just create a podcast just to simply entertain, but if I can make you think or help you think about something or help you deal with something, that's even better for me. A couple quick things I wanted to point out in closing here. If you notice, we didn't talk about a suicide note. I did ask her about that off record, and a note was left, but it is one of those things that the experts who deal in with suicide and prevention and what have you, one of the things that they advise not sharing, that if the idea of leaving a note behind is I guess it pacifies either the curiosity or the concern of, just people who are looking from the outside. They want to, have that idea that at least there's some kind of communication left before death. But that's apparently should be kept personal within who that note was left for. And I guess the people who, maybe law enforcement or whatever, who need to read that kind of thing. And I totally respect that. Also, she, after the fact, she was a little concerned, Megan, speaking of Megan, she was a little concerned that in the very beginning of our conversation, She felt like she may have been, I guess I'm trying to think how to say it myself. She was worried about, she maybe presented her parents as being a little too overbearing. And she was concerned that if you guys listen to this episode, you would draw some conclusions or think that her parents in some kind of way may have influenced part of her sister's decision making. And I listened to it, a few times, and thought about it, and I don't think that's so, but I still wanted to provide this clarification anyway. She definitely doesn't feel that. She obviously grew up with the same parents as her sister had, and again, I'm no expert on this or many other things, but to do the act of suicide, it's got to be more going on. Just somebody, a parent, encouraging their student or their child to excel in school and and things like that. So I'm not worried about it. If I know you guys, the audiences, I'm pretty sure you can determine that as well too. But I wanted to do that for Megan to make sure that was clear. Also, a few other things in the last email exchange we had. She included a few statistics that I just wanted to share with you, if it helps, hammer home the importance of this topic and its current impact. I think a lot of us appreciated a lot of it. I mean, we see it. People we're fans of, people we love, successful people, poor people. We know this is happening, but sometimes it's important to still look at a firm number and appreciate that. Some of the things she included: the number of U.S. deaths per year due to suicide, 47,000. 47,000. It continues to add context to that number. The number of U.S. deaths per year due to breast cancer is 42,000. 42,000. This is the estimated number of suicide attempts, the estimated number of suicide attempts in the U.S. per year is 1.4 million. 1.4 million people attempt suicide in the United States every year. On average, the death rate due to suicide rose by 1% every year since 1997 to 2006. And since 2006, it has risen by an average of 2% each year. Last little fact here she included was suicide is now the 10th leading cause of death in the United States. 10th. Also included some suicide prevention resources, a podcast. I don't remember if she mentioned this during the episode or this was when we were talking about it afterwards, but regardless, a podcast titled Terrible Thanks for Asking, podcast episode number 49. What do you say about suicide? Part 2. So I guess that implies there's a part 1 as well too. She said this is where people called in, admitted to having suicidal thoughts, and explained what people said that was helpful to them in that very moment. I will definitely be checking out that podcast, and it sounds like that might be an interesting podcast to for other topics as well too. I'll have to see what else they have there. But again, that was Terrible Thanks for Asking podcast, episode number 49. And it was titled, What Do You Say About Suicide Part 2? And lastly here is a 1 hour online suicide prevention skills training that's provided by Living Works. Again, that's a 1 hour online suicide prevention skills training by Living Works. And you can find that by going to the website livingworks.net/start. So that is a course you can take to for you to help you deal with somebody who is possibly having a mental health crisis and contemplating suicide. I'm sure many of you who are listening to this episode have been touched by suicide in one way or the other. Somebody you care about, somebody you respected, somebody you were a fan of. It is, like I said in the episode, it's a scary thing to me. It really is. You know, you like to think that you're a strong-minded, strong-willed individual, but again, you never know how you're really going to deal with things when something really gets bad. When you get in a really dark, emotional space, you don't know. And especially, all the things attached to, the image of being a male specifically. A lot of times, more often than not, it's looked at almost shamefully to be sad, to be alone, to be scared, to be depressed and in a dark place. And I hope that no guy and nobody at all, male or female, ever feels too scared or too embarrassed to reach out and talk to somebody. Please reach out and talk to somebody. Life will always be a struggle for some, ups and downs. But don't make a permanent decision that you can't come back from in attempts to deal with that. I love you guys. Please love the people that you love. Please care for the people that you care for. Please reach out if you need somebody to talk to. I will talk to you in the next episode. Bye-bye.